Viewer contributions make local programming possible on WNIN. Become a member of WNIN with your contribution so we can continue to make this programming available. Visit WNIN.org and click on the donate button.
Winter storms can be tough to prepare for, but when it combines historic amounts of snow and ice, extra preparations are required. We'll learn how local leaders prepared for the recent ice storm and the continuing cleanup. That's next on WNIN Newsmakers. Welcome to WNIN Newsmakers. I'm April Nading. The first full week of January hit the area with a vengeance with the historic snow and ice storm. Here to talk about how the local emergency management agencies prepared for this storm is Matt Goebel, Executive Director of the Warwick County Emergency Management Agency. Thank you for joining us today. So tell me a little bit about, for those who don't know, myself included, what is the mission of the emergency management agencies?
So at our mission here in Warwick County, it's to establish and maintain the progressive emergency management program. So that includes promotes mitigation or preparation for the response to and the recovery from emergencies and disasters that actually are held within our county.
So I guess what would you call an emergency?
So an emergency would actually be, perfect example, the ice storm. We had, last year, July 30th, we had that EF1 tornado that came through, so that would be an emergency / disaster. We also respond to structure fires within our county as well through all the departments. Just another resource that we can provide for the fire departments and anyone in our county.
So is there any criteria, like it has to impact so many people or a certain part of the county, or?
No, absolutely not. So, if there's anything that we can do, like structure fires or, just EMA is strictly when it's talking about any kind of disaster, anything that harms our residents, that's when we step in and see what we can do for our resources that we have in our county. And if we don't have those resources, that's when we have our District 10. We reach out to them to see if they can help us. And if not, we just reach out to our, the state Homeland Security. And this follows the steps up like that.
So there's still more and more. So is this something is there one of these in every county in Indiana, or?
Yes, so there is 92 counties in Indiana, and they all have EMA directors and EMA agencies within inside.
What did you mean by the District 10 or whatever you?
So we are broken up by districts, and there's 10 districts, and of course, we're at the very bottom of the southern Indiana, so we're the bottom. And then we have 12 counties with inside District 10 that the Homeland Security follows under. And we have what's called a district liaison that we have. If we have any questions or concerns, we have her to communicate with, and then we follow the steps to get those resources.
So I'm assuming with the ice and snowstorm, all the counties in the district were affected. So that would be when you had to go to higher up, is what you're referring to.
Yeah, so the EOC, the state EOC was actually activated. So that's when what's called Web EOC. That is how our communications really affect and what kind of information we're giving out to the state is by the Web EOC, but also our district liaisons. So we were fully activated and responding back by warming shelters, how the road conditions are, and stuff like that, power outages through Centerpoint, and that's how we get our information back.
So tell me about what were some of the steps you took when you first started hearing the forecast. I mean, we were all hearing this is coming, this is coming. So what do you do?
So our main thing is we're really close and we have a great working relationship with the National Weather Service. Mm-hmm. So they put on different kind of debriefings and everything that EMA directors will, get on, and we can listen to their forecast, what they're expecting for our area. And then once we find that out, that's when we start really talking with the first responders. That's the Sheriff's Department, the fire departments, EMS stations, to make sure that if they have anything that goes down, like power outages, we have generators that we can make sure that they're fully operational and running. We have close contacts with Centerpoint. So if we have any issues with that, we can contact them. And then we go through the county highway. We speak to them as well to see what their preparations are and moving forwards.
So what other departments do you coordinate with? Because I know you mentioned like the heat warming shelters, for example. What are you doing with those?
So we have one, Impact Ministries. They are a warming station nonstop, so that's the white flag. So that is, if anything below 35 degrees, that is a automatically warming shelter. So anyone can go there if they lose power or if they're homeless, they can go there. So we coordinate a lot with Impact Ministries. They do a phenomenal job here in Warwick County and in the Boonville area. And then we also coordinate with different agencies throughout. So that's the National Weather Service, the Homeland Security, sheriff's departments, all first responders, county highways, our local governments, our county commissioners. I advise them of the situations that are going on, and we just move forwards with those.
How did this one compare maybe to some other emergencies that you've had or disasters?
So a perfect example, the July 30th tornado. That is, a tornado has a path. So we have in an area of a path that has some debris and stuff, but with this winter storm, there was so much debris around the whole county. It's not just a path. So that's why we activated what's called 211, and that really helps us get the data that we need, and it also brings in the volunteers that we have.
So what do you mean by the 211? That's not something the public utilizes, right? Is it?
Yes,
it is?
So actually the 211 is actually active throughout any time, but when we activate it through the Homeland Security, that steps it up to where it adds more things for the homeowners. So that's where they, if you have insurance, what's your needs and everything like that, and it breaks it down for us. So like tree debris removal, or, someone lost some food or they couldn't get out, so they lost time for their money for work. So it's other organizations coming together that we can reach out to for our stakeholders to see if we can help those residents.
How many residents were affected? It was just really pretty much everybody in Warwick County. So
perfect question. So, through Newburgh, through the 211, I've had over 114 requests so far for 211, and it's mainly tree removal and debris removal. But it looked like that was the hardest hit area for our county in Warwick was Newburgh. So the numbers that I have is over 114, but I'm sure there's a lot more out there.
What about the people who lost power? What were you doing to help them?
So that's our main thing is to get our critical infrastructures ready to go back on. There's a lot of critical infrastructures in Warwick County that, we need to get back up. So we focus on those a lot first, just because they're critical infrastructures. But then after that, we have a great working relationship with Centerpoint, and we were in nonstop contact with Jenna. She's phenomenal to work with, and trying to get those sections of like nursing homes, schools, everything that we could use schools really as more warming shelters if it was that more of a cause. So we pick and choose to make sure that we're getting these infrastructures up.
So let's back up a little bit to what happens when you find out that we're having this storm coming in? What's kind of like a day in the life? What are you doing to try and prepare?
So the day, it's busy. It's a lot of phone calls. We reach out to a lot of our stakeholders. We're in contact all the time with our Homeland Security, our district liaison, finding out what we're doing. So I talk to a lot of local government, as in like the town boards, the presidents, to see, hey, what we can do. Maybe let's start a warming shelter. So that was phenomenal with Chandler. We had a warming station in Chandler's there. We had one in Ohio that we talked with the trustee to set up. Phenomenal work. And then Yankeetown Fire, they actually set up a warming station as well in their firehouse for the residents around there. And then Impact Ministries in Boonville. So we talked to a lot of different things to, hey, let's make sure that we're set and ready to go. And if they need anything, that's when we get a hold of the Red Cross. The Red Cross actually set that one up in Ohio Township. So we make sure we have the water, the food, everything that we can to spread out through those warming stations.
Now, how do you access the food and the water? Is that from donations or something you have stockpiled, or?
So for ours, we have some like water and stuff that we have that we can disperse out to some areas. But really the Red Cross and those stakeholders within the volunteer groups, they really come together. And then actually even the community, Impact Ministries, it's being ran a lot by all the volunteers and the community coming together to give out those supplies. But the Red Cross is what we really look at to get those supplies to us.
Wow, and they had their hands full, I mean, just with the whole area happening at once.
Yeah, it was definitely an eye-opener. And they were talking about the ice storm back in 2009. Is it going to be as bad as this? To now, and that was up in the air. But I will say it was a lot of damage in a lot of areas throughout our counties.
So after something like this, I could only imagine that you kind of step back a little bit and go, what do we need to do next time, or planning? Were there any things that came out of this that help you in future? Yeah,
so my thing is I want to make sure our residents are taken care of in any kind of disaster. And that's the responsibility as an EMA director, is to really push for that. So, getting more cots. So Red Cross, if they're running out of cots because it's a widespread event, because they just don't handle Indiana, they handle Illinois, Kentucky, Indiana, and Ohio, to get more cots, blankets, more supplies like water or like snacks and foods. That's something I'm going to be looking at getting a lot more. So just in case, they don't have the supplies, we have it on stockpile.
And how are you able to do that? Are you able to, is that again through some donations or funding?
We can look at funding, but we have a budget that we look at throughout the year, and we see where we can spend to bring that supplies in. And donations are always welcome, but that's what we really look at is through our budget.
So I assume you still have warming shelters going on now.
So right now, the shelter, the Impact Ministries, that is the only one that it's open right now, and they have plenty of space because I'm in close contact with them. They do a lot of updates throughout the day, even on their social medias. But yeah, that's the only white shelter or white flag shelter we have in our county right now.
So I know you mentioned their social media, but how can they keep updated on emergency situations?
So that is a huge thing with me coming in as a director, is I want to make sure that our residents know everything that's going on, so they can go on our Facebook page at Warwick County Emergency Management Agency, and they can follow it, and we get updates constantly through the weather, anything that's coming through, travel advisories. So that was a big thing during the ice storms, was updating their travel advisories, and we just give out all the information we can on that website.
All right, well, thank you so much. Sounds like you guys did a great job, and always planning for more disasters, unfortunately. So.
Yeah, I thank you.
Now let's hear from CenterPoint and how they manage the extensive power outages during the storm.
We kind of look at all the different news forecasts. We have NOAA, we have our own internal meteorologists. We're looking to see what's coming in. The weather predicted to be somewhere between 1/4 and 1/2 inch. Unfortunately, we got somewhere between 1/2 and 3/4 of an inch. But as we look at that to see what's coming in, the magnitude of what's coming in, we decided to go ahead and pre-stage crews. We had approximately our own internal crews, 15 of our own internal crews coming in. We had 25 contract crews come in, and then we also had 25 vegetation crews come in on that Sunday and stage around 11 a.m. to noon that day. The storm was historic, right? It was we hadn't experienced that for the past 15 years. It was, close to the ice storm that we had back in 2009. So it was very widespread. It essentially covered every corner of our service territory. It peaked at over 61,000 customers out of service. Within 48 hours, we had over 50% of the customers restored. Within 72 hours, we had 90% restored, and by the end of the outage, which occurred 24 hours ahead of time, we had almost 98% customers restored. When we have something like this, a big storm event, we can't cover this by ourselves, right? We have roughly 100 personnel to go out in the field and cover these things. So we need additional help. And we're part of a mutual assistance program where other neighboring utilities will lend their support and their contractors to come help us just like we would do for them. We had crews from really around the Midwest area. We had our peer utilities who supported us through mutual assistance. And then we had up to over 1,000 personnel, including our own, from Kentucky, Ohio, Illinois, Tennessee, and we also had some of our crews come up from Texas, from Centerpoint, to help us as well. Customers can reach out and look at our outage tracker, which is online, and see if their area is affected by an outage and then what the estimated restoration time would be to get back in service. I would like to thank our customers for their patience and understanding during the storm restoration. And I would also like to thank the first responders, the local and state elected officials, and everyone else for their help in this restoration process.
Next, we're talking to Todd Robertson, Executive Director of Transportation and Services for the City of Evansville. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So tell me a little bit first about what the Transportation and Services for the City of Evansville does in the first place.
First of all, it's compiled of like 7 different departments. So you have the transportation side, which is made up of traffic, urban forestry, street maintenance, and then we have another internal department, city maintenance, that works with actually internally. And then services would be Oak Hill cemeteries, animal care and control, and seems like I'm missing one, but I can't think of it.
That's a lot.
Oh, and Mets.
And Mets. Okay, I was wondering about the buses. So,
Yes.
So when we have a major weather system come in, like we did, what are your responsibilities when it comes to that?
Well, our primary focus when we have major weather is on the street maintenance departments, where I spend quite a bit of my time during preparation. We do a lot of weather monitoring, just like everyone else do. We get our, stay tuned to the weather forecast, and then we try to make our preparations according to how the weather is coming in. On just blanket snow, then we make sure that we try to do our preparations, our pre-treatments, where we put brine down on the road, which is just a mixture of salt water, and we put it down on the road. Necessary, sometimes we might add some beet juice, which is a little tacky sugar beet that makes it even tacky to stick to the roads. And largely that's kind of just to keep it from adhering to the road. So there's things that come to play depending on exactly how the weather is coming in.
So even though doing all those things, it still can't keep it from becoming a disaster, right?
We do what we can,
right.
But we are no match for God's creation.
Right.
When it happens, and we just try to do what we can to manage the event.
So Mother Nature kind of comes in with a vengeance.
Exactly.
So what was it like, logistically, in particular when we talk about Mets, what happens there when we have all this ice and snow with the bus service?
Well, most of our routes, when we do treatment in the street maintenance department, we have primary routes and we have secondary routes. And most of our routes, primary or secondary, they kind of correlate and intermingle or intertwine with the bus system. And so a lot of the times that when we're treating those, our regular primary and secondary routes, we're also treating the routes of which the buses travel. For this last event, buses were slow, but they were still operational, and my hats goes off to the men and women who also drive the buses. They do a fantastic job. We had minor incidents as accidents, what have you, so that is something for them to be commended about, as well as they also mitigate and try to get through those events as we're treating the roads as well.
So was their service even interrupted? For maybe a day, or how did it work?
Well, I think maybe once we shortened it a little bit, but for the most part we ran regular routes, just a little bit slower.
Right.
Everything was just a little bit slower, but for the most part they stayed on pretty much on schedule.
There are a lot of people who depend on that bus system.
A lot of people.
Do you have any idea how many you have traveling on that?
I think over the year we make about 2 million trips right at 1.9.
Oh my gosh.
People take trips, 1.9 people take trips over. And we count trips, so if a person went to their event and then they came back, that would be 2 trips. So we don't count necessarily the people, we just count the trips. So it's about 1.9 million trips as well on average is what we service a year.
So how does it work as far as you talk about you have the primary, then you have the secondary? Do you wait until the primary is how clean before you start on the secondary, or how does that work logistically?
Well, the primaries are your main arterials throughout the city. So that is our primary focus. And you
So what would be one of those, like Green River Road?
Green River Road would be one of the primary
Lloyd,
routes.
I'm guessing.
And those routes are actually on the website at, when you go to look on the city's website and you look under street maintenance or the highway department, you'll find that those routes are actually listed on our section of the page. So you can find out which ones have been deemed primary, and then you can find out which ones are secondary. So we would go out and we would treat those primary routes because those are the ones that carry the main, most of the major traffic. And what I started to say earlier is that you have to keep in mind, and for the general public, is that some of those routes are anywhere from 3 to 4 hours long.
Wow.
And so when we're doing treating a primary route during an event, sometimes it looks like that we've never been out. So we start out, and then and especially in this last event, it kept snowing. And so we would start out and we would clear when we would salt, but we'd have to come right back and work again on those primary routes. And we try to get those primary routes to either bare pavement or to wetness. And if we can get those, then we would go to our secondary routes. So it is a bit of a challenge, especially as the event continues.
Sure.
If it stops snowing, then we're in a better position to get to bare pavement sooner. But as it continues and you take a 3 to 4 hour loop that we're making, a lot of times it looks like that we have not even been there. And so we always ask the general public just to be patient with us. We'll get back around to it.
So then I assume you're also kind of coordinating with the highway department, because aren't they doing, like they're probably doing Highway 41 while you're doing Lloyd Expressway? I mean, is that how that works? Or
well, we don't
doing
do
Lloyd?
They do the Lloyd.
Okay.
The state does the Lloyd. The state does 41. We just maintain all the state roads is the state, and they're doing the same type methods that we're doing. So if you're, a lot of times you see them pre-treating, or if you see us pre-treating, a lot of times they're doing the same thing, and vice versa. So if they're pre-treating out, a lot of times we're doing the same thing because we follow the same methods. We all kind of attend the same snow conferences, and try to find the best practices how to approach an event.
Right, and that would make sense. So,
yeah.
What about I know you talked about how the snow kept coming down, so that was one challenge. Were there any other challenges for this particular weather event?
Ice is always a big challenge. When the ice and the freezing rain and all of that comes in, that always presents a challenge. It doesn't matter whether it's at the beginning, whether it's in the middle, whether it's at the end.
Right.
Ice is always a huge challenge for any event we have. And then you factor in that another component for another department for the street maintenance is urban forestry. Well, when the ice came in, a lot of the trees began to fall, and which also probably hampered a lot of the power outages as well. So you're figuring the ice on the lines for electrical lines is already heavy enough, and then you have the ice on the trees, and then if a tree fall on a power line, that also adds to the added scenarios of power outages. And then we have to go back through and try to clear up a lot of these sites. I think we had over 200 in some locations. That's a lot. That's a lot for us to have over 200 some locations, and that was at one count, and then we kept counting after that. So I'm not sure exactly how many more added, because we always get those little added calls after we compile our list and we start cleaning up process. But at max at one point we had over 200 locations, which is extremely a lot. We're still I can't say it enough because we're still cleaning it up now, and so. But that adds to it when you add that ice on it. It just really makes it compiles everything that we're trying to do and makes it even more hard for us to get through the system.
So that's what I was going to ask, if you're still cleaning up. So what are you still cleaning up?
Currently, we are still right now picking up. We did have, because of what the mayor did I'm not sure the correct terminology, but she called it a disastrous type of scenario. So we were able to get some support in from the state, and then they sent some volunteers in and to help us cut up some of those locations. And
so where the trees were down? Okay.
Correct. So they came in to help us cut them up, to get them out of the road, but they just pushed them to the side. So now what we're doing is we're actually going back to pick up those 200 plus locations and get them up off the sides of the road. So that's one thing we're doing now.
So when you just have a regular old snow come in, there's not all this other stuff. It's like you plow, you move on,
Exactly.
But now you have to go back and do trees, and oh my word. Is there a website or social media platform where people can learn more about what's going on with your department? And
we still, it's best to go to the city's website and then just search for transportation and services, and then once you get there, you'll find some brief information about it. One of the things that we govern ourselves accordingly, if you really want to know how we govern ourselves, is by the actual ordinances. We just follow the practices of the ordinances of what we're supposed to do, and that's really kind of our guidelines that spells out what your city maintenance or what your city highway garage is supposed to be doing.
Just in case anybody thinks it's willy-nilly, it's not, right?
It is not. We have to follow the city ordinances, which has been set out some years ago. So whatever we do, we do based strictly according to the ordinances. I know there's some people perhaps think that street maintenance can plow every street, but it's not set up in the ordinance. It's never been set up for us to plow every street, because in order to do so, you'd almost have to quadruple our department,
right?
Because the resources and the time it would take and everything. So it's really not set up in the ordinance for us to plow every single street within the city of Evansville. It's just our primaries and secondaries, and we focus on the schools. One
more thing I want to ask, though, was there anything from this incident that you came away with that to use for future, if there's a future situation like this?
I think for the most part, everything follows along the same, we kind of follow the same model. Every now and then you can always look back as to we could have done this,
right?
But it's kind of understanding the foreknowledge of how it came in. And sometimes just because of the way nature is, it doesn't always come in the way everybody predicts,
right?
This way or that way, it comes in a little bit different. So we always learn from each event about what we could have done or what we would have liked to have done, but just because of the nature of the event and how they come in, sometimes we just continue to try to attack it as we can.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Those are very good explanations.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. As far as all of those missed school days, the state has waived the need to make them up. Thanks to all of our guests today for talking about the response to icy weather storms. I'm April Nading. Thanks for watching WNIN Newsmakers.